Let's think about and learn about what's coming, what we're experiencing now, and how it's going to change in the future, so we can make informed decisions to keep our families and ourselves safe.
Welcome to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for people like you who care about the social impact of conscious companies and everyday heroes. Hear inspiring stories from those who put people and planet before profit and personal gain. You'll learn how you can make a difference, vote with your dollars, and get involved today. Here's your host, Corinna Bellizzi.
Hello and welcome to Care More, Be Better, a Circle B podcast. Each week, I invite you to care more so that we can create a better world together. As summer drifts into fall, we are seeing heat waves and stronger storms around the globe. The devastating potential of global warming is on full display. Fires blaze on the West Coast, and in the southeastern states, we are struggling to recover from Hurricane Helene. Climate scientists, they agree. They agree that this pattern will continue given the amount of greenhouse gases that are presently in our atmosphere and our present rate of deforestation. To help us better understand all of these weather challenges, PBS has released the 5th season of a climate-focused show called Weathered: Earth's Extremes. I'm joined by the show's host, Maiya May, and the director, Jennings, today. But before I bring them up, I'd like to offer you a taste as we review the trailer for this 6-episode series. So here is your first look at Weathered: Earth's Extremes.
I'm Maiya May, and I'm fascinated by our dynamic planet, our weather, and our climate. What began as an aspiration to become an on-air meteorologist has become a mission to figure out where we are and where we're going as we leave this long, stable climate period and enter the hockey stick era.
This morning, scientists say the 101.1 degree temperature recorded at a buoy near Key Largo, Florida this week may break a record for the highest observed sea surface temperature.
This superheated water moves out into the ocean, contributing to the heating of the Gulf Stream and the coral reefs.
You know, if that happens in any one place, it's very easy to say, oh, that's an anomaly that just happened there. But what's unique about this summer, in my experience, which is now 30 years I've been working on this, I have not seen a particular summer that is this glaringly hot everywhere.
Warming in the ocean tends to find its way out through stronger hurricanes, changes in ocean patterns, coral bleaching, loss of sea ice in the Arctic region. It's all connected.
For much of the last 10,000 years, our planet's climate has been remarkably stable in 3 important ways: temperature, atmospheric carbon dioxide, and sea level. During this time, the human population went from 20 million people on Earth to 8 billion. That stable climate period is what allowed the development of human civilization as we know it. But that stability is gone, and the impacts aren't linear. That's because of tipping points, and these are critical thresholds for our planet that, once crossed, can speed up and intensify the impacts of climate change, and they may not be reversible. How well we understand these changes and how we choose to act will define our future for generations to come. So join me in the field and in the lab to see what the brightest minds and the best science have to say about our changing weather and climate and how to prepare. And I want to share why I'm more hopeful now than ever about confronting this global crisis, because exponential change, the kind that suddenly sneaks up on us, isn't always bad.
Thank you both so much for joining me today. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yes, great to be here.
Now, I want to start first with Trip. You are a seasoned director and producer with nearly 2 decades of experience behind you in this particular climate storytelling world. You've led Weathered through the creation of something like 50 episodes, which I believe started first on YouTube and was picked up by PBS. So what made you decide to dedicate your life to exploring this topic through film?
Well, I mean, climate, I think climate is the most, or one of the, top 2 or 3 most important issues of our generation, of this time. And it's something that will touch and already is touching, almost every person on Earth. And so, I mean, honestly, since a very young age, since like high school, I was really fascinated by weather. And, in high school when I was young, I was like, oh, the extremes are so interesting. And then as I realized that those were changing and really affecting people's lives, what I wanted to do was something I didn't see out there, which was how can we combine, kind of sometimes the grim details, the real deal of climate science, of here's what's going on, with ways that we can actually adapt and survive in this moment as the weather and climate changes, and then also look at real core solutions. And so that's what we've pulled together. And, I'm really proud of this one. This season is the first broadcast season. It's longer format. We got to go on location with Maiya all over the place. And it was, so it's this one's like the biggest deal season for us for sure. And we're just, so happy to have it out.
Yeah, all of 6 episodes are streaming now on pbs.org as well as on the PBS app. And I plowed through them. I have to tell you, it was really entrancing, interesting, and still hopeful, which is, I think, the thing that is hardest for us to keep at central frame when we have these devastating moments, like what happens with Hurricane Helene on the East Coast. So it feels prescient. It's the timing of this release feels wow. And also, just to have that silver lining continually be there, I think is really, really powerful. So thank you for bringing this to life. Now, Maiya, I'd love to hear the same perspective from you. What made you decide to dedicate your career to this exploration of climate change?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really just rooted in my love of nature. I started out as, someone who was aspiring to be a broadcast meteorologist. So, I did all the internships in college, and I got the internship that I always wanted at the Weather Channel. And when I was there, I was like, I don't think this is really what I'm supposed to be doing. And I grew up in nature, and I, was exploring a lot during the time, and I was like, man, I think the best thing for me to do in this moment is to use my creativity to still tell stories about weather and climate and nature in general, but do it in a way that I can be a little bit more creative and be more of myself. And honestly, what was like the tipping point in me deciding to pursue making documentaries was that I didn't see people who looked like me when I went to parks and state parks. When I was at University of Missouri, I would just drive aimlessly to try to find cool new places to take pictures of. And it was just striking that I never saw people who looked like me when I was out exploring. And my friends knew that I did this. It was very well known that like I was the girl that just went out in nature on campus. And it was, amongst my friend group and my community, that's kind of odd. It's different. And I wanted to change that. So I figured the best way I could do that was to use my skills and the things that I do best and creatively, which is, through photos and videos and try to make nature related documentaries. And it just so happened that, I had a background in weather because up until that point I was pursuing becoming a broadcast meteorologist. So I decided to focus on weather related topics, and everything that I have done since has led me to this point. It's been in a lot of ways a very spiritual journey. But I'm here today and I know that like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Everything that has happened, even the way that I got this job of hosting this show was just like, it felt like it was supposed to happen. It feels like I'm supposed to be here in this moment telling these stories. And I'm very proud of the work that we did over the last year on this particular show.
Now, you brought something up I'd planned to ask a bit later, but I'll ask it now. It can be challenging to be that trailblazer, whether it's just you're the odd duck in your social group doing something different, or especially when you're talking about working in the sciences or being in this broadcast journalism space, you are essentially committing to doing something where there aren't very many representations of yourself. There aren't very many women in STEM. and let alone people of color at the same time. So, how did you navigate that world to also emerge with strength in the space of climate change, broadcasting? What did you learn along the way, and how might people listening or watching apply that to their own paths?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that I don't know. I kind of always relished in this idea of being different in a way. Like I don't really care what people think about me. My friends like, oh, you're out, hiking a mountain. Like I would never do that. I'm like, I enjoy it. It's just truly what I enjoyed. I grew up on a nature preserve called Davidson Arabia Mountain Nature Preserve, and the core of my childhood memories are me and my friends on this farm, just, enjoying ourselves. They eventually built a bike trail that led to the high school that I would eventually attend. That was an environmental and STEM focused high school. So for me, it was just like, this is something that I've always done. I've always enjoyed being out in nature. I really don't care if people think it's weird or not. This is what I want to pursue. I've always been kind of headstrong in the things that I want to do. And that's still who I am today. Like all that said, that is what has gotten me to this point. But yeah, like I think it's important to have representation in fields where, there typically isn't a lot of diversity. When I was in college studying atmospheric science, my atmospheric science classes, most of the time I was one of two Black people in the class. So I think that can change just by someone watching a show like this and seeing someone who looks like them. That is so important. So yeah, I mean, I just hope that, little girls who look like me, if they watch this show, then they see me, they believe like, yes, I can actually do this thing. So yeah, it's been a journey. I've learned a lot. But yeah, it's been great. Happy to be here.
Now, I know too, with your background as an on air presenter, you have to be prepared for things to go perhaps a bit as you didn't plan them to go. And so I wondered if in the process of filming, especially going on location, if either of you have stories to tell specifically that relate to that, perhaps what surprised you the most and how you responded to those challenging moments to ensure that we got to see the great work on the other side.
Trip, you start. I'm interested to hear your story. I know what my story is going to be, but I'm interested to hear your story.
I think about production in like kind of like numbers. Like you do the best that you can do. When we're doing like verite production out in the world, you do the best that you can do. You do the best planning you can do. And then you go out in the field and you see what happens and you get lucky, hopefully, right? And you don't get lucky every time. And sometimes sometimes there are like big mistakes, right? Or just things happen. And so I'm always sort of like thinking like, oh, I'm due for, if things are going great, I'm like, woo, be ready. And I have to say that like we got lucky almost this whole season. I mean, we were so lucky on so many of the things, and so many of the trips. And that's not something that you can normally say with, changing weather and climate in the way that it is right now. So, I mean, I'm super grateful for all the things that went so well. We got rain when it was hard. We got heat when it was hard. But like, this is a show about weather and climate. Like, we were filming, in Miami on the highest record high heat index ever in the city. And we were on a boat and people were getting heat exhaustion and throwing up off the side and so on and so forth. And
yeah, that was going to be my story.
Shoot. Okay. So anyway, but like, I don't know, that was the first shoot. And then I feel like it just got easier from there. I'll let you take the most exciting part of that story.
Yeah, and I'm from Atlanta. I'm from an area that deals with a lot of extreme heat, and it's like the same type of heat that you get in Florida. But it was so hot during that shoot, and there was no shade. I mean, there was a little bit of shade on the boat, but not a lot, and we were shooting directly in the sun. And I've been on many a boat, and I've never gotten seasick. Trip was like, "Do you want some Dramamine before you get on the boat?" And I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm good. I do this all the time. And I get on the boat, we're doing our thing, and I'm just like, I'm struggling. So I think I did get seasick for the first time. I was very not happy with myself. But I think throughout this series, and I've always said I want to be the next David Attenborough, or be the Issa Rae of nature documentaries, and like do this thing where I'm posting on location. And this was the first time I've done that to this scale. And I learned a lot. I learned how hard it can be at times, just, in the elements, but also like talking to scientists who spend their whole career studying a particular topic, and they know all the things, and they're using all the jargon, and you have to absorb all this information, be able to spit it out in a way that normal people, lay people, will be able to understand. So yeah, it was definitely challenging in a lot of ways, but I learned a lot, and I'm obviously better for it. And at the end of the day, we have a great product, and I'm proud of it. And I hope people learn a lot from it.
I mean, I also want to say that this crew rolls with stuff well. Maya, I mean, we still got great footage that same day that Maya got seasick and I mean, it's
But also, please tell Corinna about how we lost that drone footage.
oh, I don't know if I can talk about that. Woo! Yeah, I did crash a drone, and it did have the card that had like a day's worth of drone footage on it. And I had to go back and buy a much cheaper drone from we were like 3 hours from a city, and then drive 3 hours back and re-record as much as we could. Boy, that was yeah, the losing a drone in the middle of nowhere is really hard.
That's the challenges of doing this type of work. Before I got this show, to build my portfolio. I was doing like self-funded nature documentaries. I did one in Belize about coral reefs, and I was like, it's okay, but I think we need to step this up and do something a little bit better, like get better cameras. So we did that, and we decided to go to Utah and just tell a more light story about how weather changes our physical landscape over time. Great. I mean, we were all so excited about it. We get back to Atlanta. My director of photography calls me over to his house, and he's like, Maya, I have bad news for you. Lost all of the footage, all of it. So all of the money that we spent going on that trip, it's kind of like, dang, it's all down the drain. We obviously still had great photos, but yeah, I mean, it's just that those are like the challenges of doing this type of work. Luckily, with this project, nothing to that extent happened. But yeah, doing documentary work like this, you do have a lot of challenges like that.
Yeah. Well, I live in Santa Cruz County and I'm a scuba diver. And so the first thing that comes to mind for me is when one of those drones goes down, how many that my friends or even I have brought up from the seafloor because they get a little bit out of range or they have a complication in flight and they just go down. And sadly, there are a number of quite expensive drones that are wasting away with all that captured footage. And I think the cards can still work sometimes if they're encapsulated within that compartment well enough and they don't get corroded. So I wondered when you said that, like, did anybody try to go and get it? But
We tried. It was a lot of private property and a lot of fences. So we were like in the desert in Arizona, and
I felt really bad. I felt really bad for Trip.
yeah, I did. I felt very sad for a moment, but you're gonna lose stuff. Stuff is gonna happen, and the thing is just how you move forward. And keep the vibes. It's so much more difficult to have like a positive mental attitude in the crew than it is to get new equipment. So,
yeah, you roll with it. You learn to. And I have to say that speaks volumes for the crew you put together and the output. It definitely shows in the output. Now, much of what you did film was on location and you visited communities around the globe. So I wondered if there was a particular spot or a particular community that you visited that really stuck with you, that story that left its mark. If you have one, I'd love you to share it.
Yeah, I can go. In episode 2, we talk a lot about climate migration. It is an episode about climate migration, and the community that we went to is a it's an island off the coast of New Orleans called Ile de Jean Charles, and we met with Chris Brunet, who obviously is a member of the community. And this is one of the first communities in the U.S. to undergo a federally funded relocation due to climate change. So essentially, because flood insurance is federally subsidized, it just makes more sense, or it made more sense, to build a new community and have this community relocate versus having to continue to rebuild after repeated floods. Um, and it was really inspiring to see the community members were really involved in the process. Chris was very candid with us and telling us that although it was federally funded, it's really hard to make the decision to just pick up and leave. And it took him a while to get to the point of saying, okay, it just makes the most sense for me to make this move. But to me, I mean, you get so attached to where you grew up. I mean, I go back to where I'm from quite a bit. It's like 30 minutes from where I live now. And just the feeling that I get when I'm around the places that I grew up walking around, and just like have my core, like develop my core memories, it's special. So for a community to have to just pick up and leave everything that they've known for generations. I mean, it's not just Chris and his family just moved there within his lifetime. His family, his dad, his grandfather grew up in the same area. And yeah, I don't know. It's just we saw how hard that decision is, but also I think it's a good example of how climate migration can be done in a thoughtful way, that still involves the community members, that still allows them to make decisions about their livelihood moving forward, in such a sensitive time. I think it's a great example of how it could be done. So that for me, that was my story that really hit home. I don't know, Trip. I know we both kind of feel the same. That was a great story that we did.
Yeah, I mean, and I think one of the most powerful moments of the entire experience of filming was in New Orleans. We were filming with a scientist who had been down there, a social scientist who'd been down there working with the community as they were moving. But she lived in New Orleans for a long time, and she moved out of New Orleans basically because her homeowner's insurance quadrupled, and it just she felt like the writing was on the wall and it was time to go. But we went back to her neighborhood. She had just left, and her old neighbor, came out and just started chatting with us. And I mean, he was like, "Look, I lived in the Ninth Ward before Hurricane Katrina. I moved to this neighborhood after Katrina, after a stint elsewhere, and he's seen the total disintegration of a community in the Ninth Ward that was generations deep of people, and then he's seeing that same thing happen all over again as people's insurance double, triples, quadruples, 10x's, and so." The thing that stuck with me is that he said, and I know people are dealing with this right now from Hurricane Helene and fires in California and all over the place. But, what is the cost? Like, we never put numbers on the financial benefits, much less just the emotional important, ties that we have to our community. Right. So he was like, look, if, there was, a kid with developmental disabilities, and he lived on our block, and if people would see him, he's a teenager, right? So he was very mobile, right? So if people would find him 3 or 4 blocks away from his house and in trouble, they would just be like, "Oh, we'll just help you get home," right? And the point he was making was like, how much would it cost to have a caregiver that always knew where a teenager was, that could get that person and help them and bring them home? And when storms roll through, when fires roll through these communities and people leave, that's the sort of thing that you lose, right? And that's what's at stake in these decisions that we make. It's the bonds, it's the living next to your family, But then also even just thinking about the economic cost of that and the value of that is like, it's not something we ever really put a number on. And so I think we don't value it as much as we should. Right. And so that was a huge deal for me, and just all of the neighbors as well not having insurance still. And I think that's something that people are going to be going through with Hurricane Helene, with the third hurricane to hit the Big Bend area of Florida in such a short time. What do we do? Like, how do we deal with not having insurance? How do we deal with really high insurance premiums? Do we stay? Do we go? How do we go? And those are questions we're going to have to answer as we move forward in this new climate. So, and that's what we tried to explore and sort of tease out from people who are experiencing it in that episode.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, the same is true in California. We were evacuated because of the CZU fire complex that hit the Santa Cruz Mountains. And some of our friends did lose their homes. Their homes were too close to some of the lightning strikes, and there was virtually no time to get out. They lost animals, they lost their properties. And now what we found is that the fire insurance premiums have not only gone up significantly, mine has raised 10% every year, no matter what. So at the end of 10 years, you're paying double what you were before, right? Um, I'm on kind of the perimeter of an open space preserve. It sounds very much like Maiya, where you grew up in a way, because now there are trails there and all the wildlife you can explore directly from the bottom edge of my property. But when you have all these homes, built into the crevices of these mountains, because real estate is at such a premium here in California, then, there was really nowhere to go quickly, and often only one road in and out. And much of the mountain space in North Carolina and that got hit with Hurricane Helene is very similar in that capacity. Perhaps one road in and out, maybe two. And so when we run into these situations, it's both challenging from a human perspective, and like this came rapidly and we didn't have much time, and we thought perhaps it wasn't going to come this far inland, or we thought perhaps that fire was going to stay on the other side of the ridge or the other side of that highway, and then the wind changes. And suddenly you're confronted with something so big and so overwhelming that it is emergent. Um, so it's not only from that life perspective and that community perspective, I think, but when at the same time it feels like there's not an economic protection in place, not the government saying, we're going to guarantee that you have the ability to get some insurance so that you're able to stay in your home. It's very stressful. So
It is.
I so resonate with every single one of those challenges.
And if I may, I'd love to just add, I think there's a sort of like a fourth wrinkle to what you just said, right? And I think that is that there is so much that we can do. And we cover this in episode 2. We cover this throughout. I mean, we've talked about this in Weathered a lot. There's a lot we can do to our homes to make them safer, right? We can't hurricane proof our homes. We can't flood proof our homes, and we can't fire proof our homes. But every hurricane is not a category 5, and every fire isn't the campfire, right? And so there's a lot that we can do, and we can really, it is about numbers. And that's, unfortunately or fortunately, what insurance thinks about as well, right? We can retrofit our homes. We can build new homes that are ready for fire. We can build communities with fire in mind when there's when that's the danger, right? So we don't build communities with one way out. We build communities with multiple ways out. We build communities, with wide shoulders on the roads that go in and out, so we can increase the traffic and, get flow going both directions. But we as homeowners and even renters can do a lot that's very affordable and very easy, starting with like Saturday weekend projects. And we're seeing, I interviewed someone who went through the Park Fire, and his neighborhood was really on top of doing the home hardening and the defensible space work. Can't just do one or the other. And they saved almost all of their community, even though the fire ripped right through. And that's true with hurricanes. You can do a lot with hurricanes as well, right? A lot of homes get their roofs blown off and they flood from the top, right? The water rains in and, mold grows, and the home is basically has to be taken down to the studs or taken down completely. And so we're not like sitting ducks, and we don't have to be. And at some point, some people in locations that are particularly risky are going to have to make a call. is it worth having myself, my pets, my family in this risky place? Or is the risk low enough that we can do a lot to prepare and live with the rest of it and have a go bag ready? And I think that's the other thing that's really important that we really try to talk about in our show, right? Is like, how do we make those calls? Like, where is that? Where are those lines? And let's think about and learn about what's coming, what we're experiencing now, and how it's going to change in the future, so we can make informed decisions to keep our families and ourselves safe.
I love that. Yeah, I think knowledge is it's the key to figuring out how to move through this and navigate this crisis. When you know better, you do better. People ask me, what are you going to do now that you've done this show? What are the things that you're going to do now? And really, it's just going to continue. For me, it's going to be continue to educate myself and to take that information and give it to whoever wants it. Give it to the community. People need to know what to do. And what's happening. Because if you're not aware of what's going on, you're not going to prioritize things like voting for people who are going to put policies in place to make it easier for you to, have to make that decision in the future. So yeah, I love that. I think knowledge is key.
Now, throughout the show, you have 6 episodes out on pbs.org or via the app today. You cover nature-based solutions as well, because I think some of what you're talking about when it comes to the environment we live within, some of those solutions can be nature-based. Like you plant more trees on perimeters of properties so that you have a natural windbreak. You go ahead and introduce more fire breaks and defensible land if you are in a space that is, likely to be ravaged by fires. You can plant mangrove trees along our coastlines to protect those coastlines. But then you also really dive into some of the technology that we have and how we're presently even looking at the past to learn from the past by sampling ice cores and things like that. So I really enjoy the breadth of the exploration, but I wondered if through this lens you each have perhaps a favorite episode or something that stands out, or perhaps something that really surprised you that you learned that was new that you could share.
For me, I feel like that's kind of twofold. I can share my favorite episode. And that's really hard because all of the episodes are so good and extremely informative. But I think that the episode that hits the most home for me is the one about extreme heat. And we talk about a nature-based solution in that episode, which is planting more trees. But for me, again, I live in a very hot place, Atlanta, aka Hot Atlanta. Heat is the reason why I decided to pursue making a climate documentary. In 2019, here in Atlanta, we experienced the most 90-degree days on record. We had 91 days reaching 90 degrees or more. And it was at that moment that I was like, okay, this is a problem. I need to focus on, making climate related content. But a lot of people don't realize that extreme heat is the most deadly form of weather, period. And there are people who are at higher risk. If you're 75 years or older, if you're 4 years or younger, if you're immunocompromised, you're at an even higher risk of dying from heat. And we all know people who fall into those categories. And in a warming world, this is going to continue to be a problem. So the fact that the US is losing trees in the most vulnerable areas, in the areas where you have more people who are older and you have more people who are immunocompromised and just can't cope with this type of weather, the fact that we are losing trees in those areas was very concerning to me. And it was I was very excited to go to Medellin and explore a city that is figuring out a way to build and develop their city around the big trees that provide a lot of shade that are already there, instead of cutting all the trees down, clear cutting the trees and building buildings and apartments and then planting smaller trees afterwards, because those trees take time to grow and to provide the shade that you need to mitigate during a heat wave. So yeah, it was just great. Like I said, extreme heat hits home for me, and it was just great to see a nature-based solution to that, and figure out how we can start to, mitigate the effects of extreme heat. I do have another point or another like aha moment that really hit home for me. But I'm curious to hear Tripp's favorite episode. I know Heat. I don't think Heat is his favorite episode, but that was mine.
I mean, I loved that episode too. We got to go to Colombia. We got to like explore it, really different place. So Colombia was fun. But no, I mean, I think my favorite episode is episode 5. And that's because I think it's the one, I think it's a message that that people aren't, I don't know. I think it's hard to like really believe and internalize what we're getting at in episode 5, which is, and this is the change that, I've been working in the climate space for my entire career, right? So my entire adult life, I've been thinking about this a lot. And I, I've been in some dark places of just like, I don't know that we're going to be able to do this in time. And I think a lot of people around the world feel the same way when we see, commitments made and promises broken in terms of policy and in terms of, corporations. And then, it's so hard and expensive for individuals to really like do the changes that we need to happen. But that, I mean, I really think that in the last handful of years, 3-5 years, that has changed and shifted. And I am surprised by the fact that after a year of traveling all over the country and internationally to really understand where we are and where we're going in this moment of extreme change, I am far more hopeful than I've actually ever been. And that is not because there's like this technology or that technology or, this billionaire, funded this thing or whatever, right? It's like, but what has happened is, and what has to happen. And Maiya asked, the director of Rewire America, how do we solve climate change? And I loved it. I mean, he was just like, it's simple. We just electrify everything and we get that electricity from low carbon sources, right? And I hadn't understood it in that way, but what's happening now is finally low carbon sources are cheaper. So our short-term incentives now line up with our long-term survivability on this planet, right? And that's never happened before. And we've never seen a world where that, where we really can just push the gas pedal down, because it's very hard to decide to build a coal-fired power plant if it's more expensive and it's dirtier and we're going to kill people with the exhaust and the air pollution. And so Maiya and I got to go watch a coal-fired power plant be like blown up with this massive like mushroom cloud fireball. And I think nothing says energy transition like a good explosion. And so, if you don't believe it, like watch the episode, because the numbers are exciting. We are experiencing exponential change in a good direction. California has doubled its battery capacity a couple of years in a row. I mean, that is amazing adoption, right? We're not going to get where we need to go without pushing harder. It's not done. And I think that's maybe one of the most important messages, but we have to celebrate our wins. And we're on a winning streak when it comes to decarbonizing.
Yeah, Trip, that was going to be my next point. That was going to be I said I had 2 things. That was the second point or episode that I really like. Because, I mean, that's like that was the main aha moment for me as well, especially when we laid out the different climate scenarios that are, often referred to in popular media. And, the worst case scenario is business as usual. The episode is called Not Business as Usual, because that is not the path that we're on with everything that's happening with the energy transition, with electrification. We're not really on that path. So the common portrayal of, the dystopian and very apocalyptic future where humanity can't survive on this planet, as of right now, with the exponential rate of change that's already happening, that's going to continue to happen in the clean energy space, that's not going to be our future. Is there a lot that needs to be done? Absolutely. But we really are on a good path.
I'd add one more thing, which is I think that people have heard, if you've been involved in climate activism, if you've been paying attention to environmental politics, you've been lied to a lot and you've been misled a lot. And if you've been paying attention, that has happened over and over and over. And people are not ready to hear or believe that we're actually making the progress that we are. And so I think I just want to like acknowledge that for a lot of the people who are watching it, you might see this and feel really challenged and you might feel really confused too, right? I mean, like we've been told, oh, don't worry, Elon Musk is going to take care of it, and it's just like,
Sorry, I have to laugh.
yeah, you have to laugh. I mean, like no billionaire is going to do this for us, right? And it has taken a lot of pushing and a lot of work for decades. And, I don't think it's okay. And I don't think it's productive for us to pretend that we're not making progress, because we really are. And
Well, the fact that solar panel, they're so much less expensive than they used to be, and a solar farm is less expensive today to run than a coal farm, which is what you're speaking to, right? Like it makes sense.
I mean, the cost of solar panels has gone down 90% in the last couple of decades, and it's still dropping, right? And I mean, it's, if you think about, it's much more like a computer technology, which is, trending towards zero, right? Like it used to be so expensive to buy an external hard drive with a bunch of gigabytes, right? And that cost of storing that knowledge is trending towards zero. Not that it's going to be free anytime soon, but it's moving that direction. And so is low carbon energy. And, and battery technology is moving at the same rate as solar technology has, in terms of more efficiency and cheaper and more environmentally efficient and less destructive, which is great. And so yeah, I mean, I'm, for the first time in my life, in all of our lives, in the experience of being human, we have the potential to live in a sustainable way. We have a path to get out of this alive. And that's exciting. It is.
I do want to add something, Corinna, and I'm sure some of your viewers are probably gonna feel like, well, you guys are gaslighting me because, yes, a lot of good things are happening, but we are in an election year, right? And we don't get into this obviously to for the sake of not getting too political, but it is important to note that I think voting is the single most important thing that you can do, that anyone can do to solve the climate crisis. Because so many of the things that create the climate crisis are huge systemic political related issues. And that's just a fact. And that is, I think it's important to know. I feel like that is the elephant in the room. And I've seen some of these comments come in. I think it's important to know and to just address that. Yes, we are on a great path, but to continue that, you're going to have to get out and you exercise your right to vote.
Right. And unfortunately, there's a lot of spin doctoring that happens too. Like suddenly you hear that Hurricane Helene was man-caused somehow, like, Democrats caused the storm to happen. I'm just like, where are people even getting these ideas? We do need to, I think, approach this from a bipartisan perspective of the fact that climate change is something that is going to affect all people, that the Inflation Reduction Act put money in the right places to drive innovation so that from a technology perspective and even from a nature-based perspective, we can fund more projects. I think we forget these things too soon after they're in the rearview mirror, that the effect of something like the money that is going into these programs is going to be positive. It is going to be good for people. It is going to create jobs. It is going to help retrain people from, let's say, something that is phasing out. Like people are concerned if they are truckers, long haul drivers, for example. Some of those jobs are likely to be replaced as technology improves and as we have autonomous vehicles, right? So people are afraid, but they could be retrained for jobs that are relevant today, tomorrow, next year, next generation, and that are climate wise. And so I'm encouraged by those things. You, in your last episode 6, covered the eVTOL space, or electric vertical takeoff and landing. And I have to bring this up because my husband works for Joby Aviation. So he's in the eVTOL space, and I get to hear in my home about the technological improvements that are going to result in a future aviation world that won't be as taxing on the environment either. Because for every plane trip we take and every package we have delivered, we are increasing the carbon cost of our daily lives. So these innovations they take time to develop safely because they're complicated, right? They need funding to be driven. And in the case of Joby, I think they went public with a SPAC, and they had an initial investment from Toyota of something like 600 million before that even happened. Big change takes big money behind it too. And there are those that are investing in these new technologies that will change the way that we live in the future. And I think a very positive way. And so that your show kind of ended on that hopeful note where you're covering things like, here's all the green technologies that we're seeing today, I think, oh, it was just beautiful. I love the way you ended it with episode 6. So I wanted to just share that with everybody today.
Yeah, it's like a pleasant reminder that, like, listen, I know things have happened that make certain groups disillusioned, but there's been a lot of good money put in the right places. And it's exciting to see. I feel like it was a good reminder of like the great things that are happening in the climate space. And I'm sure you can add to that.
Well, yeah, I mean, the other thing we tried to do with episode 6 is, and throughout the whole episode, I mean, the whole series, is paint this picture, which is really where I believe we are right now, right? We are somewhere in this weird moment where the impacts of climate change are increasing exponentially, and the technology and the shift to and the transition to low carbon energy is also happening at an exponential rate, right? And you know, we have a fighting chance, but we don't know who's going to win this race, right? I mean, there is absolutely potentially a future where the impacts of climate change ramp up faster than we are able to mobilize low carbon energy. And it is up to us, right? I mean, no matter what happens, the next generation is going to have a world that is fundamentally different than the world that we live in today. And we are at this point where we now have so much more choice in what that looks like than we ever have. And I think that's very exciting. But it's not a done deal. The impacts of climate change are absolutely making it more difficult to do a lot of these things, right? Increase in convective storms, more hail, more challenges to large solar solar farms, right? Like it's a race. And the more that we do in our own personal lives to speed that transition up, and as you said, in like big policy, the more likely we are to, the good side is to win it.
To have a future we can be proud to live in. So I think it's attainable too. Some days it feels daunting, and sometimes like there's a discouraging moment, week, month that comes your way because the natural disasters do continue to ravage our populations and our landscapes. I'm hopeful that the mangrove will keep growing ahead of the pace of that little bit that the sea levels keep rising each year, as I learned about through the show. Planting more trees, doing something as simple as that, even in your own yard, can be part of the solution. So I so thank you both for joining me today. I wanted to know if there was any perhaps lingering thought you wanted to leave our audience with, or if there was a question that I haven't asked that you wish I had, you could ask and answer it. I'll start with you, Maiya, and then go to Trip.
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered it all today in this great conversation. I think the biggest takeaway that I want people to leave with after watching the show is, again, that, I get that things can seem bleak sometimes, and there's obviously still a lot more that needs to be done. But there are a lot of good things that are happening, and there are a lot of great reasons to be hopeful. I'm a positive person. I like to think when you think positively, you affirm that and then you attract that. So I I think that I'm just proud of the show. I'm glad we were able to tell the story from a very positive lens.
Yeah, and I maybe want to just add that, we produced a climate show, and people have said, "Wow, what a powerful time for it to come out after this devastating hurricane." And sadly, like, you don't have to be prescient. You don't have to be even trying to time it these days if you're releasing a climate show to come out at the same time as a climate disaster, right? There's something happening so frequently. And I have a lot of friends in Western North Carolina who lost so much, their personal belongings and their homes. And I know people are going through that in Florida and California. And, so I guess I just want to say that I hate it when we release this media at a good time, when people are interested in this kind of topic. I'm ready for that to just stop happening. I'm ready for us to not have to be so interested in this every time, because it does feel like we often are releasing a show that has to do with hurricanes, and right when a hurricane comes out, or and that sort of thing. So, I hope everybody who's watching the show is able to stay safe and really able to do everything we can in the immediate term to help the people who are really facing some of the most difficult moments of their lives.
Well, Trip, it sounds to me like you would hope to work yourself out of a job then. And I have to ask myself and ask you, if this weren't your life's mission, what would you do? Well, let's say the climate crisis is in the rearview mirror. Are you going to still produce films? And if so, about what?
Actually, I would just shift to housing and access to housing. Like, that's the other thing I really think about a lot, and I'm really passionate about. I mean, I don't mean to always be thinking about the problems, but I think that's maybe one of the other most important challenges of our time, right? Is making sure everyone has a home in this world where there's so many people. But don't think I don't get outside and enjoy. I mean, we live in a beautiful world, and it's a fascinating time to live in it. So I would be out as much as I could, just enjoying, and documenting that. I love documenting the beauty.
Spoken like a true documentarian. Well, thank you both for joining me today. This has been my distinct pleasure, and I look forward to hearing from all of my audience about what they think of your show. And I'm sure many will be running right from this episode to go watch the trailer, the first few episodes. It's binge-worthy, and I think you'll learn a lot along the way. I know I learned bits and pieces along the way, or just even to hear the perspectives that you shared helped to add new color and really get me thinking differently about the problems too, from more of a solutions mindset perspective, especially on days where I might be feeling a little bit bleak. So thank you for the work.
Thanks for having us. Really fun conversation.
Thank you. It's great. Great to meet you. Great to be here.
To find out more about Weathered, Earth's Extremes, visit pbs.org or just pull up the PBS app. I encourage you to visit the blog page on this episode's blog page at circleb.co. It includes the video version of this episode, complete transcripts, and links to resources and past episodes that can continue this climate education and conversation. While you once found all of this on our dedicated site at caremorebebetter.com, you'll now find it at circleb.co, our cause before commerce, education resource, and eco-shopping site. And while you visit, I encourage you to sign up for our newsletter, because for every new subscriber to our circle, we're planting another tree through our partnership with Forest Planet and 1% for the Planet. So join our circle and let's build that greener world together now. Just visit circleb.co. Thank you, listeners and watchers, now and always, for being a part of this pod and this community, because together we really can do so much more. We can care more, we can be better, we can grow back our forests, decarbonize our atmosphere, and do the hard work of reversing global warming together. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for social good. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share with your friends to help us reach more people and spread more social good.